Discover how a shift in perspective can lead to incredible growth. Welcome to The Flipped Story.
I'm David Gadarian, and this is The Flipped Story, the place where human potential meets market creation and every conversation rewrites what's possible. The show explores the journey, the grit, the narratives we build while navigating life. We're here to share the lessons learned in the driver's seat and find the wisdom in the journey, because at the end of the day, it's all about the story we tell, the strategy we use, and the flip that moves us forward. So let's dive in. Today's guest is a powerhouse in the digital marketing world, but the story doesn't start in high tech. It starts in a neighborhood bar in Lafayette Hill called the Boyler Room. Sean Boyle grew up watching his father build a community around a business, but life threw a curveball that no marketing degree could prepare him for. When legal troubles threatened the family legacy, Sean didn't just step in, he stepped into the fire, taking ownership alongside his brother during one of the most challenging chapters a family can face. The trial by fire created a unique kind of native empathy. It's the grit that he carried with him when he walked into Momentum as a sales intern, and it's the fuel that drove him to become one of the owners of the very company in less than 3 years. Today, Sean is a partner at Momentum, using high-end virtual tech and to help small businesses tell their story, because he knows better than anybody what's actually at stake when a business owner fights for their dream. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. I got to be honest, I own a lot of shows, but this has been the best introduction I've ever had. So thank you. That was very kind. I love it.
Served. Very, very well deserved, and thank you for that. So, Sean, before we dive in, why don't you tell us a little bit about your today?
Yeah, for sure, man. So based in Philadelphia, I spend my time majority working and growing Momentum, our marketing agency. Decent sized agency. We have close to 100 people, I'd say now. Do a lot of SEO, web design, virtual tours, the whole nine. It's pretty much full service. And then I spend the time I do have left with a lot of rental properties I have, managing those, as well as just different varieties of hobbies I have. So I like to keep myself very busy.
It sounds like it. My goodness, amazing. All right. So, Sean, when I open the show, I use the term native empathy in the intro because it feels like you aren't just selling services to small business owners. You're standing in their shoes. When you look back at the transition from the Boiler Room to where you are now, does it feel like one continuous story, or was there a day where you felt like maybe you became a completely different version of yourself?
It's a great question. I feel like it's the same story, it's the same movie, but it's evolutions, it's different chapters, right? And I feel like, every single chapter of my life has been somewhat of an improvement, whether it's me quitting alcohol, which I did 3 years ago, whether it's me taking ownership of Momentum, whether it's, me stepping into the sales role at Momentum, or me helping, my dad with some of the legal stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's all an improvement. I feel like for myself, I'm going to be 29 this July. I'm going to be an old man in my eyes. And, I got to be honest, David, it's one of those things where for me, I just have that mindset of just not being complacent and trying to just improve in every facet of my life. And that's what really drives me. That's my purpose outside of my faith. And it's been a good ride so far, I will say.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. So, the liquor industry is kind of interesting. I know a little bit about it. My parents, for about 30 years, owned a liquor store. I understand some of the motivations, some of the temptations there. I love this idea that, you quit drinking. You obviously had a lot of familiarity with drinking. We could talk about that kind of separate or in, but really I want to start right now with the bar itself. So you grew up, you're watching your dad run the Boiler Room. And before all the legal troubles hit, what was the most important lesson you learned about the soul of a neighborhood business?
It's really a family at the end of the day. And, we were so the bar was in South Philly. It was on this place called South Street. It was a couple bars and couple restaurants and spots from the TLA, the Theater of Living Arts, which is a huge music venue at the time. Like Juicy J, Drake were really popular, Meek Mill, obviously from Philly. We would have comedians go there, Kevin Hart. And after the show, a lot of them would actually go to the Boiler Room. So it got known to be, we would have these celebrities in here, these neighborhood regulars would come in, and it was really a great way to pass time. And it was a good, fun thing. But, over the years, I really never knew there was a huge problem until it all came kind of crashing down. And I will say about my dad, he had a Percocet addiction for 30 years as well, which he never really, I guess, made it known to me. especially because he was able to kind of keep it under control. But it was fascinating because he sat me down one day, and we can talk about this maybe in a little bit, but sat me down one night and he's like, yeah, I have this addiction, and I would have never known. So it's the whole soul of a neighborhood business. It's everybody. It's a whole family. That bar, I think, was one of the most popular bars in the city at that time, simply because we had a lot of connections. We had a lot of people coming in who they would do this, they would do that. So it was, I don't know. It's like something from another time, man. Like we were in Narnia or something. It was a lot of fun, I'll be honest with you. It was a great time.
All right. Well, that gets us into, the weight of ownership. So now suddenly you and your brother, you weren't just the owner's sons. You're now some heavy circumstances floating around. Take us back to the first few days, the first day. What was the flip in your mindset when you realized the family legacy to some extent is now sitting on your shoulders?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't just take ownership of the bar with Ryan at that time. For me, it was I have to instill legitimacy in the Boyle name because I feel like we've lost that, right? The Inquirer, Philly Mag, like all the articles, honestly, in the city were trashing my father, right? And I wanted to just have something that could blossom, but it was not too far removed from the feds coming in. They took ownership of the bar. It was a really short-lived, ownership experience. But in that time, it was interesting to see some of, the financials and talk to, at that time, the general manager. And she was great. It was just one of those things where we weren't able to do anything because the feds had come in and seized those assets. But for the time that we were technically, quote unquote, running it, it was interesting. I mean, we learned a lot about business. We learned just kind of where the stake of the company was. And funny enough, the company was in interestingly enough, really good shape. It was just, there was a lot of dark things behind the scenes, David, that I didn't know until it kind of came to light. So it was interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's an interesting topic of how to overcome the shadow of family, how to redefine your own shadows, set your own suns, if you will, your own horizons. And I think there's a lot to learn from that. I think that's kind of neat area to kind of dive into as well. So here you are, you're in this kind of environment. You have these stresses. Most of them are probably very new and novel, hyper unfamiliar to you. You're getting coverage from places. How old were you at the time?
Oh man, I had to have been 18 or 19.
Yeah, so you're totally out of your depth. I think that's fair to say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so if you're going to share a small business vulnerability lesson right now that you can't learn in a marketing textbook, at this point, looking back, what would you say that would be from that experience?
You can learn a lot about marketing from a book and X's and O's, but to truly understand how to run a business, you got to learn people. And I think one of the things that I was kind of thrusted in was not just dealing with the actual business, but dealing with all of these different personnel in the business and, regulars as well. Like I'll tell you a quick story. There was this, I'm not going to name the guy because
That's
he might
fair.
still get in trouble, but there was a guy who was pretty much a local drug dealer and we didn't know it at the time, or I didn't, but everyone else did. And he was actually a very intricate part of the business. He essentially would like do some security. He would do some managing here and there. And he was a really important person, but I never knew, the level of all these different people and their story and all the drama that kind of happened, during that time. But really, I'd say the biggest thing, and this is, I think a lot of college people that are maybe listening to this and just like young professionals, being able to manage people and being able to talk to people and have just somewhat of a, I want to say, persuasion over like influencing them, especially if you're the boss or if you, can instill some sort of a confidence in them that, oh, this is a great company to work for or whatever, which my dad did. But that's going to be something that's really key, I would say, especially when you first get into business, because you could, read the textbooks, you could go to, college, but until you're actually in it, learning how to manage people, I would say, is going to be the biggest thing, at least for me, that I learned very quickly.
Nice. So let's kind of move forward a little bit. So now you move from a physical bar into a virtual environment. You start interning at this company, Momentum. It sounds like you hit the ground running pretty hard, pretty quick. Did you think coming into that, if you look back on those couple of years, were you carrying a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, or was it fresh, clean slate? Here we go.
Yeah. Well, before that, I'll tell you a quick story. So what's funny about the whole internship is, so I was a freshman in college, right? And I was an engineering major at the time. And I, was not that good at math, not that good at physics. I was only interested in engineering for the money to like be able to support the family. I was like, why am I doing this? Like, this is like so silly. After I realized I didn't want to do engineering, I wanted to do marketing. And I realized that my skill set was just not there. It wasn't the skill set that was going to get me to be valuable in the marketplace. So I called Momentum up. Irene Hurd, I remember her name, and I can picture her face at Penn State Altoona. She was my advisor. And I go in and she's like, hey, here's this big stack of internships that you could apply for right now. I'm thinking, yeah, oh my gosh, I got to call these people. This is crazy. The first company that I called was Momentum. Called, sent an email to Mac, my now business partner and really great friend. Consider him a brother at this point. Send him an email and I say this. I say, listen, I want to apply for an internship for my sophomore year. He's like, so you're a freshman. You're applying for an internship a year in advance. What are you talking about? And I said, yeah, like I want to be able to give you value. I don't feel like I'm valuable enough. So literally from that time to my sophomore year, David, I spent my entire being learning, like reading books, learning sales, persuasion, like every book on sales, the Alex Hormozzi's, Think and Grow Rich, all those kind of books I was reading and actually just getting experience. So I learned that skill and I grew into that skill. And then that summer, I was able to sell several $100,000 in, marketing and ticket sales for this blockchain world conference that we did. So it's a crazy story, man, but that's ultimately how it happened. And I certainly did have a chip on my shoulder. It was one of those things where this is my first quote unquote professional experience in anything. I not only want to elicit some sort of not just competence, but I know I'm talking about it. I'm very valuable, but I honestly was like, hey, I consider myself, kind of an entrepreneur. I want to do this. I had a podcast of my own at the time. Let me see if I can add value here. And as time grew, I ended up making partner, which kind of was my whole goal from day one, I would say.
Most people can't make that transition that you just described as aggressively as you just described it. I think for most people, they kind of come into a career, they glide their way in, they do their 10,000 hours, they kind of apprentice, they get better, they don't necessarily hit the ground running with as much vigor as perhaps you brought into it. Do you think how much of that early trauma in the boiler room and that whole journey, do you think motivated you to go fast, to kind of leapfrog, really put that fire in your own belly?
It was the majority of my fire and my passion, I would say, David. It was so real to me. I mean, because at the time he was put in while I was a freshman. He was put into prison while I was a freshman. So throughout my entire college life, he was in prison. So I really had to be my own man. I would go and see my dad here and there, but I wanted to be the best version of myself. And I would go to sleep, but very honestly with you, to get a little vulnerable, extremely sad and extremely kind of like almost depressed, I guess, of like, oh, what do people think about me, blah, blah, blah. I was reading articles, I was reading these, Facebook messages and groups, just like completely trashing my dad. Right. And it occurred to me one day, I just didn't care anymore. I was like, there's nothing, I have no control over the situation. People can say whatever they want. The only variable that I have in my control is myself on what I say, what I think, what I do. So let's start putting in those positive frameworks and just work as hard as you can. You're never going to be this young. You're never going to have this opportunity. Even if this opportunity becomes zero, you will have learned a good skill, good internship. And, I just feel like that was kind of the main motivating factor for the most part. Yeah.
That's neat. That's neat. And even that being able to pivot towards positivity, I've observed in my life that can be challenging for people to grasp that within a timeline that's going to be super productive and allow them to not wallow in the pain, if you will. And I'm sure you see that a lot as you manage people and within your organization. So let's talk a little bit. I want to come back to that of how you're applying a lot of what you've done, your background in your business. But before I do, I just wanted to ask one more question around momentum. The focus, the underlying, I guess the nature of the question is, so you grew up in a house where, you had a bar, you had some other things. Your dad was the center, right? He owned those businesses. Do you think walking into momentum, even though you started as an intern, do you think did you have just just through, I guess, nature versus nurture, do you have a bit of an ownership mindset already cooked into how you approach things, or is that something you developed kind of in context while at Momentum?
That's a great question, David. I don't want to sound arrogant when I say this,
No,
but
you're good.
I had the mindset of an owner from day one. To tell you a quick story, my internship, I think I needed to be in by 9 o'clock at this WeWork in Northern Liberties. I came in around 6:30. My laptop, I would wake up at 5, take the train. I would take 2 trains actually, go to the office. I instilled that level of, well, Sean's here to mean business, right? He's here to get stuff done since day one. And I'll be completely honest, it was so easy to rise above. And I don't want to use that term, like belittling anybody, but to being able to level up in that company, I was able to just honestly just putting in work and showing up early. I don't think there was no magic pill. It was just consistently doing those things and setting a precedent and having that kind of, just personality of value and being able to get along with my teammates, but also letting them know, like, no one's going to outwork me. No one's going to outwork me from day one. And even if I don't know something, I'm going to Google it. I'm going to learn about it, and I'm going to learn more and know more than you by, tomorrow. Yeah. From day one, man, I had that kind of mentality, and I still do. I still want to grow and learn and all that stuff. So yeah.
And do you think your childhood positioned you for that,
Oh,
despite
for
all the
sure. I mean,
adversity? I mean, that's kind of, similar. My folks had a couple of different retail businesses, and it was, I'm very far away from owning at this point. I will say I work at a big company, and it's wonderful, but there's definitely something there. And you think coming into this environment, you kind of had some additional kind of tools in your toolkit that maybe others without that benefit might not have.
yeah, I mean, and outside of the toolkit and skills, I just think from a physiological perspective, like just my general makeup, that's what I always kind of wanted to do. Like, especially when I was in engineering. And honestly, since I was a kid, like I come from a divorced family, I've had a lot of heartache, a lot of trauma in my life, but I'm grateful for that trauma because if I wasn't able to go through that trauma, I wouldn't have been this person, this man that I am today. And I know there's a lot of people who have a very similar story with that. So, a lot of people say, oh my gosh, like I had this happen or that happen. I flip it around and I actually make it a positive because who knows if I didn't have that happen, if I didn't have that difficult part where I had to work, I had to grind, I had to do X, Y, Z, right? I wouldn't have been here. I wouldn't have that skill set. I think from honestly, when I kind of got out of the womb, I've always wanted to be an owner, entrepreneur, and just have control over what I do and think and can, earn. Yeah, it's 100%. You're right.
It's neat. And I think, it gets into some of that nature versus nurture and some of that built in what you were born with in your soul, as it were, and what you were able to learn um, and how you cook it up, I guess, is the easiest way to kind of talk about it. All right. I want to kind of shift us a little bit and start talking about some of your journey in the context of momentum, if we could, if that's all right. I got a real kind of a weird question for you, but so I looked at momentum and I saw some of the things you guys are doing, and it looked like around pandemic you got into virtual tours, and particularly for the real estate space. How much of your bar experience do you think plays into that and this concept of curb appeal and what the kind of how you bring some of your universe into to the space?
Wow. I don't think I've ever been asked that. I think the level of creativity, always being flexible with the bar. We had different specials we were running, different promotions. We would, digital marketing at that point in the early 2010s, early 2000s was really nothing. But as it started to grow, people obviously were using it more and more. So when we were doing different specials, we would, do different uh, parties and themes and stuff like that. And I think I kind of took that creativeness with momentum. And I'll give you a perfect example. When we started doing the virtual tour stuff, it was a perfect storm where it was 2020, gosh, 2021. I had just graduated, it was my first year out. And I started saying to myself, because we would get leads in Ohio, Columbus, New York City, right? And we would just have a Google business profile in Philadelphia. So I said to myself, well, what if we have Google profiles all across the country? So what I actually ended up doing using that creativity was I said, okay, let me partner with a photographer out in New York City, Boston, Chicago, LA, whatever, ask them to share their address, their business address on my Google business profile. So now that we have a Momentum 360 Chicago, Momentum 360 LA or Boston or what have you. And we were actually able to get more leads that way. And then once we got the leads, we would have a photographer who contractually is under Momentum, who then would go and do the work. I don't think if we didn't do that, I mean, I think we still would be fine, but I don't think we would have had the growth spurt that we've had during that time that springboarded us to be one of the nation's leading virtual tour companies and, one of, multiple Inc. 5000 winner, Philly 100, stuff like that. It's been a good, accolade list. But yeah, I think, again, it all goes back to that creativity and what innately I kind of think, okay, let's try something different. Let's try this, try that. Never being complacent. I think, when you have complacency in a business, that's when the business starts dying.
I love that. So that gets us into the next piece here. So you had alluded to this. You were, as you started at Momentum, you were already podcasting. You were definitely early in that journey. Clearly, you've had a good line of sight on things as they're starting to happen from a digital perspective, whether it's, podcasting, early days, or virtual tours. You've had a good finger on the pulse of digital, the digital pulse of it, as it were. So I guess my question for you is, from an agency perspective, how are you guys consistently looking at kind of where the next is to build, I don't know, I guess the word would be a moat for your clients and your customers as they start to kind of look to tell their own stories, their own journeys?
Yeah. I think in 2026, David, it really boils down to AI, how we're using it internally, clients are using it externally, and how we can honestly combine the two. I'll give you an example of that. Before, I would have to make my own content, my own reels, the scripts, all this stuff, right? Now with AI, internally, we can have a script. I can change a couple words here and there. I can have it spit out, do these 20 reels that from our data research are very searchable and people search a lot. So you want to rank for them. People rank for them. We get more clients. And then on the opposite side with clients externally, we use that same strategy. So honestly, it's a good way for clients to get more business. It's a good way we can get more clients ourselves. So I think a lot of it just boils down to AI. And if people are using AI, how they're using it. And, we can talk about that later maybe, but I just still think AI is greatly, greatly underutilized in a majority of small businesses for sure.
Okay. I want to come back to that then. Absolutely. But one final question specific to Momentum and your journey there. You've had your own life journey. How do you use some of that motivation to put in protections, how to lead, how to manage, how to think in terms of the folks you work with? How's that play into? How does your background and your own kind of flip, as it were, how do you kind of continue to bring that back into your organization?
I think for me, I have a very, I would say, extroverted personality, to say the least. But at the core of me, I'm a Christian, and I think just for me, that groundedness and that discipline in my religion, in my belief, has intrinsically taught me, honestly, how to talk to people and, run a business. Whether someone who comes into my company and they are, fresh out of college or they're a college intern, or whether they're 40 plus years or much older than me, 50, what, the case has, they're an account manager. They've been doing this for multiple decades, honestly, maybe longer than I've been alive, right? I treat everybody the same. I don't put, a silver spoon in anybody's mouth, even if they have a great track record, you treat everyone completely equal. And I think people see that, and intrinsically it creates a level of trust that, okay, I'm not favoring anybody based on this or based on that. And outside of that too, I just feel we're very fair with what we offer because it is a fully digital remote agency. So, the majority of people we have, honestly, David, are contractors. They're 1099. So we don't necessarily offer employee benefits. So for me, I try to add in as much value outside of work that I can. So people can work whenever they want, wherever they want. They can take on the kind of clients they want. Let's just say they have a expertise in healthcare for social media, right? Then we kind of play matchmaker and make sure they're working with those types of healthcare clients with social media. So it's a really great company. I know I'm obviously biased in the sense of like people enjoy working with us. They make a good amount of money. And again, it all goes back to expectations and really treating everyone equal and giving them the tools to be successful with what goals they have. Because I'll tell you what, people come in and they're, trying to earn a little scratch to take the wife and kids out on a weekend basis. And I have people who come in on the other side and they're pretty much looking to do full-time work with us. So it's being able to balance and kind of reverse engineer what goals they have for themselves and giving them the tools to succeed in the agency and kind of, work whenever they want and work who with what they want to.
So I've been listening to you, Sean, and it's been kind of neat to hear some of the layers, some of the evolution. Just I just want to come back to that concept of faith. And was that something in your childhood, or was that something more an adult that you discovered?
It was, when I was a kid, I remember St. Jude, which is an Episcopalian parish, I believe, in Lafayette Hill. When my parents were together, I think I was like 5 or 6. It's probably one of the earliest memories I have. But I remember going to church. I remember going to mass, and really the first David male figure mentor in my life that was a very, very positive experience outside of my father was the pastor, Father John. And you ever meet these people that are larger than life figures, whether they're athletes or celebrities or what have you, right? That's how I felt about Father John. There was a level of calmness, of holiness. I can't really describe it, but he really instilled a lot of good, just concrete pillars of me as a man. I remember, I think it was in Virginia or I don't know, but he had this huge house, like pretty much imagine a circle. His house is right in the middle of it, and he has all these acres. You go down and there's a huge lake. He's got a beach almost for the most part. Beautiful place. And we would have these retreats. And I just remember like eating s'mores, fishing with him. And it was just, it was such a positive experience because he, at the end of the day, wanted boys to become men. And I feel like that's such a lost art in today's day and age. People who, I'm not saying all, people, but it's just, for me, I'm really glad I had that experience. So it really, grew my faith and just really instilled those pillars of, just being a really solid man at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's nice to hear how you apply some of that into your business today. All right, thanks for sharing that. All right. So, Sean, we spent a lot today on the why and the how of your journey, the boiler room to the high speed growth momentum. On the show, we love to provide our listeners with what we call the flipped story recipe book. I want to move from narrative to ingredients here and a little bit of a fast motion here. You've cooked up some success under what I would say is intense pressure. You've developed a specific flavor of entrepreneurship, and you focused on, from what I can see in your business, really elevating the small business owner in a lot of neat ways through digital and other. So what would you say, Sean, is your primary ingredient for your recipe book in terms of flipped? What's the one thing or things that are non-negotiable, the habit that allowed you to flip the script, the one thing you'd want to share with everybody in that regard?
Well, I wish I could give you some really nice, juicy, sexy answer. It's not, unfortunately. It's consistency. I think consistency has been the pillar and the hat, or the thing, whatever I hang my hat on, where, I don't think I'm intrinsically born with any set natural skill set. When I was a kid, I was actually very introverted. I didn't like talking. I didn't like doing really much of anything. But, at the end of the day, I wanted to be this kind of person, and I knew it was going to take consistency. It's like you keep doing what you're going to end up wanting to do. What's the easiest way to do that? Keep doing what these other people are doing, right? So I kind of followed that model. And that's with anything. I think if you are in a place of your life right now that you don't love, whether it's your job, whether it's a relationship, or wherever it is, take just an understanding of where you are, audit your life, and reverse engineer how you can get there. Because there's people who are living lives that you want to live, and the playbook's out there. But the main ingredient for me, it's not this, red pill, blue pill, whatever, this like crazy, sparkle of dust of magic or whatever. It's getting up, whether you feel great, you feel terrible or indifferent or whatever, and just getting it done and being consistent, showing up day after day. That's honestly the majority of my success. It's not that I was more skilled than anybody. It's not that I was, more likable than anybody. It was that I showed up, because at the end of the day, a lot of people are just not consistent. They quit right before they hit that gold mine. And if I had to say one thing in today's day and age for people, it's to keep doing what you're doing, be consistent with your goals. So yeah, that's honestly the best way I can give you that answer.
Love it. So I know we were supposed to wrap, but I do want to ask one question to close us out. You had alluded to, and it's on top of mind of everybody, particularly in the world of digital marketing, digital strategy, digital sales, you name it, pretty much every business right now is in some way derivative or very front and center focused on AI and what that means. And so if I were to push you on this, Sean, in terms of artificial intelligence, what do you think are some strategies to empower, allow, encourage others to flip their own story?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give a perfect example that I think would be very valuable for your audience, especially small business owners. So let's just say you owned a roofing company, right? You own a roofing company, you have a Google profile, you have a website, you have a social media profile, you're running a couple ads, whatever it is. At the end of the day, people are still going to go on Google to find roofing companies near me. But now what people are doing is they're using Grok, Gemini, ChatGPT to use that search for them and to essentially audit all of the companies who do roofing in a certain area and then find the best one for them. So they don't have to spend countless phone calls, countless hours doing research. It can all be right in front of you in the blink of an eye. I think the easiest way business owners can grow with AI in 2026 is being searchable on AI, being able to be found on AI. How do you do that? There's multiple different things you can do, but really at the end of the day, Google and AI want to see undeniable proof you are who you say you are. So again, using the roofing example, if you do business in New England, right? That's where you are. And that's where, you obviously are a big Patriot fan. It's one of those things where you want to show photos of you doing work in those areas in New England and Boston and, that state right in Massachusetts. You want to show roofing photos. You want to geotag your photos. You want to have service pages on the website so you can easily be indexed from those AI search engines that I just talked about, because it's going to be more popular than ever and people are going to be Googling and searching more on AI, interestingly enough. So that's one of the biggest things I think people can take from anything with growing with AI. There's a lot of different ways you can do content and do this and do that. But if you really want to grow with AI, you want to be able to be found on these search platforms because people are getting more leads than ever on search. So I would say undeniable proof you are who you say you are, location, service, and for the most part, you'll be getting a lot more leads.
Love it. So final just comment for you, Sean, how do people find you? I'll put some links in the show notes and all that, but how do they find you?
Yeah, really simple. You guys can just email me, Sean@needmomentum.com. That's my email, SEAN@needmomentum.com. Then if you guys honestly want a free marketing audit for yourself, 215, that's our main number you can call as well. And yeah, that's how you can get in touch with me.
Well, thank you for all of that. That was pretty spectacular. Yeah, that's a wrap on this episode of The Flip Story. Again, a big thanks to Sean Boyle for sharing his journey and the lessons that shaped it. And we hope today's conversation reminded you that while you can't always control the plot, we all have the power to flip the narrative. Until next time, keep moving the story forward.